Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. I am your host, Jackson Mummy. Glad to have you with us. Happy 2019. Hard to believe that we're already into 2019 and starting to think and study for the February and July tests in 2019. I don't know about you, I'm pretty glad 2018 is over. That was not a fun year in the bar exam. Looking forward to a better year for everybody, but boy, it was a tough year. And hope that you have endured it, survived it, and now looking forward to good things coming up. If this is your first time with us on the podcast, welcome. We're glad to have you with us. We offer our podcasts in a couple of different formats. You can watch the video by going to our website and entering the episode number. So it's celebrationbarreview.com/231. That's episode 231. You can also listen to the podcast on Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, lots of places where podcasts are syndicated, and glad to have you do that as well. And then we also have an archive of all of our podcast episodes. We've been going now for, I think, 4 or 5 years, actually. And you can find that on our website. There's a button at the top of the page for podcasts. Just click there. And the archives are all there along with the show notes. So lots of different ways to get your bar exam information. And we do come to you every week to talk about all things bar exam related. And we've got lots of information to share. Now, at this stage of the bar exam cycle, we've got a lot of folks preparing for the February test. And we've got people gearing up right now and registering and starting their studies for July 2019. And regardless of which test date you're looking at, I want to encourage you to get underway with your studies as soon as you can. Certainly for February, there's no question about that. This is the time. If you're a July bar taker, though, this is a great time to get started and take a lot of the pressure off by keeping your studies to a minimum. We want to offer all of you, regardless of your test date, the opportunity to join us for a special free live training session. We call it Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. And this training will be on Thursday, January 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, in this special live training, I'm going to walk you through 4 steps that successful bar takers follow. We'll be sharing case studies of students who've done the steps that we've designed and how it's worked for them. We'll be taking some polls. We'll be engaged in some back and forth feedback for you to share your thoughts and questions. And then I'll do a Q&A at the end to answer any questions that you might have. It's a 90-minute training program. It's completely free, but you do need to register, and you can do that a couple of different ways. You can go right down here on the show notes on the video or audio page. There's a link for the webinar. Just click there and register. Or you can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com/webinar and click there. Now, if Thursday, January 10th doesn't work for you, we also offer the same material in a daily on-demand version, and you'll find that button when you go to register for the training. Just click on the on-demand version and you can watch at the date and time that's most convenient for you. But either way, make sure that you join us for this special free training. Do something different, make the next bar exam your last bar exam. All right. Well, in today's episode, I wanted to share with you a video that I recently made that I titled Situational Awareness. And really what I wanted to do was to talk about some things that you should be aware of as you begin your studies or think about which exam you're going to be taking, which date, which circumstance. There's a lot of different things we could talk about, but I identified 4 areas where I think having situational awareness will enhance your studies as you prepare for the bar exam. So let's go ahead and jump into that message. Have you ever noticed how there comes about a particular phrase in sports broadcasting that just becomes the rage, and all of a sudden it seems like every broadcaster in every sport is saying the same phrase over and over and over again? Well, I've noticed that recently about a phrase called situational awareness. Maybe you've heard of it. Situational awareness. Every broadcaster talks about how this sports team, this football team, has got situational awareness. They know how to play and make the big plays at the right time. And I started thinking about situational awareness as it pertains to the bar exam. And I wanted to spend a few minutes today to talk about how you should apply that concept of being aware of your circumstances, of your situation, and taking that information to help you plan and prepare as you study for the bar exam. I think that there are 4 things that you should be aware of as you begin your studies or enter into your studies. And I want to go through each one of them and show you what difference it makes to have that awareness. Well, the first of our 4 situationally aware circumstances is that you need to be aware of the time frame that's available to you for study. Now, what I mean by that is that you need to examine where you are right now, how far away the bar exam is, the next exam, and whether or not you have enough time available to you to be prepared for that test. As I'm recording today, we are reasonably close, within 60 days or so, of an upcoming February bar exam. Now, is that enough time to study for the exam? Well, the answer is it depends. Generally speaking, our experience over now more than 30 years of teaching students to pass their exams is that you need about 250 to 300 hours of total study time. 250 to 300 hours. Now, if you break that down over 60 days, that means that we're looking at, and my math's not great here, but I think we're looking at about 5 hours a day. Is that manageable for you? Well, if you're not doing anything but studying, yeah, I think that's easily manageable, and there's no problem there, and you should absolutely move towards that test date. But if you've got a full-time job and a family and other responsibilities, 5 hours a day may be a real stretch for you. And if you can't realistically see your way to 5 hours a day, I think it's unlikely you're going to be ready for that exam. Too often I find people signing up and preparing for a test and then suddenly looking up and they don't have any situational awareness and they go, oh, there's too many assignments to do before the test. How am I going to be ready? Well, it's a question to ask before you start, not when you're 3/4 of the way in. And so I think it's important to have that awareness ahead of time. Now, by the same token, there are people who would be starting now preparing for a July exam, which is much further away. Well, this is an easy one. Situationally, you can see that you've got a lot of time available to study. Maybe you only need to put in about 5 hours a week. And you can take some time off for holidays and special events and work events and so on. I think it's important to be aware of when that exam date is so that you've got some idea of the time frame in which you're going to have to study. Knowing that time frame, then, you can make the decisions you need to make around the other obligations in your life so that you're able to get your studies in. Is it possible to spend that 5 hours a day that I was just talking about coming up for an exam in 60 days, even if you're working and have a family? Well, sure. If you take some time off of work, if you turn over some of your home duties to a spouse or a family friend or a neighbor or someone else, absolutely it can be done. But you have to be thinking about those things in advance. So the first thing I think you want to be aware of is what's your time frame, what's available to you. If you know you've got a big trial coming up and you're a practicing attorney, well, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to take the exam right after that trial. In the same way, I deal with a lot of people that are in tax accounting, and there are certain times of the year that just don't work for them. And so I think you want to be situationally aware there. So that's the first one, pretty obvious. The second area where I think situational awareness applies for a bar taker is to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses. Now, it's axiomatic, I guess, to say what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses, but I don't find a lot of people really do this process in a very intellectually honest way. And I'm not suggesting here that they're being deliberately dishonest, but I think that there is some level of delusion that creeps in when we start trying to evaluate ourselves. What I'm talking about here is an honest evaluation of your strengths and weaknesses, not being delusional. You know, when I hear people tell me that they think they can be ready for an exam, but they went to an unaccredited law school, or English is not their first language, or they've got some other massive challenge in terms of the way that they process information, and they think that they're going to be able to get ready in 45 days before an exam, well, that's delusional. That's not likely to happen. And so I think one of the things you have to do is make an honest evaluation. What are my strengths? What am I good at doing? And you don't have to be unduly harsh on yourself here. There are some things you're good at doing. That's how you got to the position of taking the bar exam in the first place. Be honest about those. You don't have to share this list with anybody else, but I would make a list. What are the things you're good at? What are the things you don't feel so good about? Maybe you don't feel good about your writing, or maybe it's your multiple choice test taking, or maybe it's your study habits. Whatever those things might be, make an honest evaluation of those strengths and weaknesses so that you can evaluate what you need to be working on as you study for the test. Without that list, without that roadmap, I think it's hard to know where to put your emphasis. Now, if you're in a course like ours and you're in a personal or premium coaching plan, you're going to be getting the benefit, I think it's a benefit, of an outsider, a third party's evaluation of your work. And I think a supportive mentor can go a long way to helping you understand where your strengths and your weaknesses might really lie. But I really worry sometimes when I hear people describing themselves in these wildly delusional ways. And it's sometimes you just want to scream and say, no, 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 hold up a mirror. You are not the fairest in the land. And I think it's important sometimes to know that. Not because it means you can't ever get to where you want to be. It just means you got to recognize the reality of your circumstance. Another part of strengths and weaknesses for situational awareness is that I think you have to be able to interpret your prior results accurately. If you've taken the bar exam and failed, you need to understand what that failure meant. I talk to people all the time who tell me about their prior exams, and they tell me they're really close when they were really a long, long way off. I mean, as a percentile, maybe 20, 30, 40% off of a passing score, but it seems like it's a close number because they don't understand the scaled scoring system. Or they'll say something like, well, it was the performance test that killed me. And I look at their multi-state score and it's 20 points below passing. I think sometimes there is also this incorrect interpretation of results. And so if you're not entirely certain about how to interpret your results, I strongly encourage you to contact us. Certainly if you're in our course, we want to talk to you. But we even offer a free consultation where I'm glad to talk with you about your results and go over them and help make sure that you understand the actual scores themselves. In fact, I do that for all of our students. If they don't pass the exam, we record a video for them and show them exactly how to interpret their scores. Why? Because with a correct interpretation of the scores, you stand a much better chance of being able to move forward and correct any deficiencies, shore up any weaknesses, and build on your strengths. And I think all of those things are important. But very often I find students are unaware of the reality of their scores, and frankly, the bar examiners don't do a lot to make that information available. Now, there are some states like Georgia that give you virtually no information. So in that case, it's not so much a correct interpretation, it's just having a better understanding of the work you did going into the exam. And so, again, we go back to that idea of an honest evaluation versus being delusional. And then the third part of strengths and weaknesses for me is the concept of hard facts versus impressions. I was just talking about Georgia students as an example. They don't get any number except one multi-state number. Not much to go on. So what do you do there? Well, I think at that point you have to start looking back at your studies and in your preparation and your practice. But there's two kinds of evaluation. They're the hard facts. I did a practice test, I got this score. I did this number of questions, I got this number correct. Those are hard facts. Then there are impressions. I felt like I was having trouble with this subject, or I didn't really understand this part of a subject, or I didn't feel like I could write effectively. A hard fact would be I couldn't do a performance test in 90 minutes in my practice times, or my essays were consistently running 400 or 500 words long when they needed to be 800 or 1,000 words. Those are hard facts. Impressions are really just your feelings about it. And they're both valid, they're both important, but it's really critical that you sort out what was a hard fact and what was an impression. Sometimes I see people that take their impressions and they turn them into facts. They're not really facts at all. So people will say, well, I only got 60% of the multi-state questions correct, so I failed the exam. Well, that's not a hard fact. I mean, the hard fact is you got 60% correct, but the impression is wrong. You didn't fail the exam if you got 60% of the answers correct. And so I think what happens sometimes is that we get confused between what's real and what we feel like. The bar exam never feels good. I don't know anyone that walks out of a bar exam really humming and whistling to themselves and saying, I killed it. I think those are the delusional people. The people that pass feel just about as bad as the people that failed when they walk out of the test. It's just that nature of an exam. And so I think your impressions can be helpful, but only to a point. And I think that you need to balance that with as much hard data as you can get. Now, again, if you're in a mentored course, you have the advantage of a mentor who said, I've looked at your work and here's what I see. Unfortunately, there are some big box bar reviews out there that quote grade essays and tell people, oh, this is a passing essay. This is, you got a 7 out of 8 or something, whatever crazy system that they use. And then their essays come back and they're nothing like that. Why does that happen? Well, it has to do with the quality of the teaching. If you have a mentor who's hired off Craigslist and who's never taught in their life and doesn't teach writing and hasn't worked in the bar, I think the quality of the report you're going to get back is probably diminished. I think the better way to do that is to hire a mentor that's got a track record, that's worked with a lot of people, and can give you an analysis based on looking at literally thousands of answers to those exams. If you're doing that, then I think your impressions meld closer together with the hard facts, and you've got a better idea of your strengths and weaknesses. And I think situational awareness here comes back to understanding what am I good at, where do I have weaknesses, and then making sure that I continue to build on my strengths, but that I shore up or correct the deficiencies that I find. So that's our second broad area of situational awareness. The first was being aware of the time frame. The second was strengths and weaknesses. The third area of situational awareness is to be aware of your past. Now, this is a little bit like looking at strengths and weaknesses. Strengths and weaknesses, of course, is just a current evaluation of where you are, and that it certainly incorporates some of what happened in the past. But when we look at your past behavior, your past results, your past activity, I think what we have to do here is to separate out what really happened versus what I call revisionist history. You know, my daughter described a process to me. She went back into the gym after her first child was born, and she said, you know, I think I got gymnesia. I said, what's gymnesia? She said, I forgot how much I hated it. And, you know, I think there's a certain truth about the bar exam the same way. We get barnesia, right? We forget what really happened in the past. I talk to licensed attorneys pretty frequently who are switching jurisdictions and have to take the bar exam again. And they start regaling me with stories of what they did 30 years ago, 40 years ago, maybe even more. I appreciate that. I think it's great, and it's wonderful that they passed the bar. But then I ask them, are you still driving the same car you drove when you took the bar exam? Do you have the same television? Are you using the same telephone? Do you have the same word processing devices, computers and laptops that you had 30 years ago? And of course the answer is no. But the presumption is that while all of those other things in the world have changed, the bar exam somehow remains static. And whatever I did coming out of law school typically is something I can replicate now 30 years later with a legal career and a family and other commitments. And that's simply not going to be true. That's revisionist history. That's where people start really getting mixed up, and they think that what they could have done in the past is what they can do now. I've had lawyers tell me, well, I think all I need to do is a couple of weeks, go to a hotel room, brief some cases, and go in and take the bar exam. Well, that was true when I took the bar exam. It is not true today, and you can't get away with that any longer. There's no bar exam that's really susceptible to that minimal level of study. And yet we have people who really have forgotten, and even the ones that think that that's what they did, they probably didn't do that. It's probably been so long ago and shrouded in so much mythology that they've really forgotten the work they really put in. So I think it's important that you not fall victim to revisionist history, yours or anyone else's. You know, it's a lot of people out there telling you what to do about the bar exam. And I'm constantly amazed at the level of the lack of sophistication of a lot of that advice. It doesn't come from a good place. It doesn't have much benefit or weight to it. It doesn't have much data behind it. It's just somebody's wild, crazy opinion. Well, okay, I mean, take it for what it's worth. But the reality is that if you know what really happened in your life in the past, maybe you took the exam and you failed. Well, what really happened there? What did you do? How did you prepare? Don't put revisionist history in it. Don't suddenly cloud it up with, well, it was unfair and this happened, if that's not really true. The reason that you don't want to do that is that you really need that clean sheet of paper. You need to have a clear-eyed look at what's happened to you in the past. Maybe your past is just the last bar exam. In that situation, you want to be really, I think, objective about what occurred. What did you do well? What didn't go so well? Maybe it's time to switch up the bar review you're using or the approach that you're using. Maybe you put in an extraordinary amount of time memorizing and creating flashcards. If that didn't work, maybe you should stop doing that. You see, I think the point of all of this is that you have to be aware that your past is not necessarily the predictor of your future. Whether it was a good past or a bad past doesn't mean anything. It's a brand new exam. You get to start fresh and prepare in a fresh new way. And I think if you're aware of that, you'll avoid being drawn into that trap of, I'm just doing what I did in a prior exam that doesn't exist anymore, or in the last exam and it didn't work for you. I think all of this goes to the concept of mindset. What's your mindset as you go into the exam? Situational awareness around the past helps set a mindset. I'm capable of this. I can do this. I'm able to be successful. I'm willing to change what I did in order to be successful. The students that I find are most likely to fail are the ones that come to me with a string of failures and a mindset that says, I can't succeed. It can't be done. I'm stuck in this and you can't help me. And my question always is, well, why are you here? I mean, if you know you can't succeed and you don't believe I can help you, what are you doing here? Why are you giving me your money? It seems ridiculous to me. It seems to be a lack of situational awareness. And so I think the better way to approach it is to walk in and say, this is what's happened to me in the past. Here's good or bad. And here's what I think I need to do, but I'm open to teaching and guidance and mentoring. I think if you've got that open mindset, then you're going to be much more effective and much more successful in moving towards your goal of passing the bar exam. So I think you need to have that awareness of your past, but you don't want to be tied down or locked down to that past, regardless of what it was. And then the final area in which I think situational awareness plays a role is to look at your current circumstances. You know, there are some realities that all of us face. I think money is one of the big ones for a lot of people today. What are your current circumstances when it comes to finances? Do you need to work while you study for the bar? Do you have the luxury, and it is a luxury, of having someone take care of your living expenses or even take care of your bar review expenses while you prepare for the exam? Do you have the luxury of not having to worry about creditors calling you and not being able to make payments or put food on the table? Those things will impact your study. There is no doubt about that. And often I find myself having to suggest to people that they would be better off to wait 6 months or a year, save up some money, get themselves in a better financial position before they take the bar exam. You know, I think one of the worst mistakes that you can make is to plow ahead into the next exam under-resourced. And what I mean by that is that there are people that take an exam, they fail, and now they're desperate. They've got a lot of money in student loans, they've got a lot of other debt, there's a lot bearing down on them, and they're not able to get the job they want as an attorney because they're not a member of the bar. I recognize how difficult that can be. But then the decision that they make is, well, I'm going to double down and I'm just going to keep taking the bar exam, but I'm not going to put any more resources into it. And I'm just going to hope I get lucky. I'm going to hope that using some of these free YouTube videos or some borrowed books or some old material, somehow lightning will strike and I'll pass the bar. Well, here's the reality. Statistically, it doesn't happen. In most of the major jurisdictions across the country today, the pass rate is less than 50%. And for repeat bar takers, it drops dramatically. If you're taking the bar exam a second or time or more, your chances of passing the bar are around 20 to 30%. And with each time you take the bar and fail, that number drops even lower. So the reality is that there are people taking the bar who have a statistically very low chance, and they're not putting any resources into it because they're stretched too far already. It would be far better for those individuals to stop, take a breath, go get the best job they can find with their JD, and spend 6 months or a year saving their money so that they're in a position to get the resources that they need, the help they need, in order to make a real push in order to pass the bar. I know that that's hard news to hear for a lot of people, that a lot of you think that if you just keep slugging away doing the same old thing, something's going to be different. But in point of fact, it doesn't happen that way. And so I think if your finances are problematic, if, for example, we offer a course for $97 a month paid over 12 months, that's not a lot of money. It's $3.20 a day, less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks. If you don't have $97 a month to put into your bar exam, you are not likely to pass. You are not likely to get through character and fitness. You are likely to have problems in the miraculous event that you do pass the bar and you become a member of the bar. If you don't have that much money, you are going to be in financial difficulty right from the outset. It's going to be very difficult for you as a member of the bar. And I think that sometimes we get into this delusional mindset where we think it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows and unicorns once you pass the bar. That's not true. And so I think you've got to have an awareness of your current circumstance, and that's number one. The second area of current circumstance that I think you've got to look at is your work situation. I have people that come to me to take the bar who have incredibly difficult work situations, and they're in high pressure positions, managing partners of law firms, for example. And I I really worry when I see that kind of an individual because I know that they're going to be stretched and pushed. They're not going to have much time. They're going to try and do it all on the fly or, late at night, in the middle of the night. And I know that these are extraordinarily successful people or they wouldn't be in these positions. But the truth is that some of them put themselves in an impossible position. I had a student sit for the California attorney's exam who was the managing partner of a major law firm and told me, frankly, that they weren't going to have more than a few hours left of time to study in the month before the exam. Well, there's not much likelihood of passing that exam, no matter how smart that individual was. And that's exactly what happened. They couldn't pass because they didn't have enough time to prepare. So I think you've got to be aware of what your circumstances are at work. I mentioned earlier the example of an attorney who's in practice and knows that they've got a big trial coming up. If you're going to be in a trial or doing depositions or in litigation for a period of 2 or 3 weeks while you're studying for the bar, it's going to be nearly impossible to get ready. You're going to lose that time, and so you've got to build it into your schedule. So maybe you have to push back to a later bar exam date or clear your calendar or make some changes there. I think no matter what you're doing, you want to look at your work situation and then sit down with your employers or your coworkers or your partners or whoever it might be and say, I need to carve out some time. I need this time off. I work with a lot of private attorneys in private practice who are small solopreneurs. And oftentimes what they tell me is that they simply set up a day or 2 days a week when they closed their office door and said to their secretaries or assistants, I can't be bothered. For 3 hours here, I'm studying, and 3 hours here, I'm studying. That's really the most effective way to get this done. You don't have to give up work to study for the bar, and the people that tell you you do are not telling you the truth. You can make it. Go back to the 250 to 300 hour total I gave you. That is manageable. You can do it even if you're a very busy, very successful person. You can do it if you give yourself enough lead time to study. I would say the same thing is true in evaluating your current circumstances with respect to your family. If you have significant family responsibilities, young children, children with special needs, adults, parents with special needs, health issues, you've got to build that in. You've got to factor it into your study. You got to know that there are certain times you're not going to be able to study. I love the enthusiasm of parents of newborns. They think that they've got it all under control because the baby isn't moving. And then whoops, the baby rolls over, and whoops, the baby's pulling themselves up, and whoops, the baby's starting to walk, and oh my God, everything has changed. And suddenly the quiet time you had to study has evaporated. You need to have some awareness of where you are in the life cycle of your family. If you've got a family member, a close family member that's having significant health problems, that's a reality that may take you away from study. And you need to be aware of that and recognize and build it in that that's a real possibility. The worst possible thing that can happen is to have someone that you care about and love who needs you and you feel like you need to go study. That is an impossible situation and one in which no one feels good. And typically the studying suffers, but so does the family relationship. And so I think you've got to be situationally aware of what your family circumstance is. I have lots of students that ask a family member to come in and help and watch the kids, for example, while they study for the bar. I think that's a great idea, but they do it in advance. They plan for it instead of being caught in the middle and then being panicked. Well, those are the 4 things. I'm sure there are others that you can think of, and I'd love to hear them, but those are the 4 things where I think situational awareness can make a difference. Being aware of your time frame for study, being aware of your strengths and your weaknesses in the current moment, being aware of your past, how has it affected what you're going to do now, and being aware of your current circumstances when it comes to study. If you have that kind of situational awareness, I think you're going to be much better off in making a decision about when to study for the bar, which exam date to sit for, how to proceed, and how to move forward. If you'd like to know more about any of those areas, we'd be glad to talk with you. We offer a free 20-minute consultation. We'll put a link here so that you can check that out. And I'd love to be able to brainstorm with you a little bit about what your situation is and raise your situational awareness. Well, I hope you found that message helpful. Situational awareness is a big deal right now, and I think it's important for you as a bar taker to be aware of where you are and where you're headed. Speaking of where you're headed, want to remind you again that on Thursday, January 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, we'll be offering our free live training, Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. You can register by going to celebrationbarreview.com/webinar. Look forward to seeing you there to find out the 4 steps that successful bar exam takers follow. Well, that's it for this week. Look forward to seeing you next week. Hope you all had a great New Year's and look forward to pressing on along the extra mile as we start heading towards the 2019 exams. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.